Yeah, cool. Okay. So, welcome everyone to the IEP webinar series. This is the fourth in our series of 8 webinars in partnership with the Better Health Generation. Excuse me. Thanks to Kylie and the team all the way from the other side of the world. Can you believe it is night time there? I'm hoping Kylie feels refreshed after her few days off over the Easter holidays. This week's webinar, as you'll know, is entitled Mental Health and Wellbeing Considerations for Your Clients During Uncertain Times. And I think this is the first time in this series that we've concentrated on the clients that we all serve and support. Please make sure that you sign up for the rest of the series when the links are published in the IEP Learning Network e-bulletin. Make sure you register for that, and also register for the IEP YouTube channel. We're starting to gain many users there, lots of people viewing these videos again, using them, I'm sure, to instruct and support colleagues and clients. So please get active there. Stay well, stay safe, and let's get chatting on the chat while Kylie gives us all her pearls of wisdom around this subject matter. And we hope that you take away something today that's really useful for supporting your clients in these challenging times and beyond. Over to you, Kylie. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you to the IEP. I wanted to reiterate, as per my last session, that the IEP has 2 key values, and the first one is building the skills of frontline staff, but the second one is networking. So I would like to take the opportunity after tonight's presentation to leave the chat open so that you can connect with your colleagues for about another 15 minutes to just give you a chance to say hi to people as you have been on the chat, but also to connect, which is really important during this time. So before I get started, for those of you who I haven't met before, I just thought I would quickly introduce myself. So my name is Dr. Kylie Henderson. I am a clinical psychologist by trade, but I'm also the founder and managing director of the Better Health Generation. The Better Health Generation is made up of 6 different brands, where we service the UK with all of these brands, including Aim to Work, which is our return to work health services, Me and Work, which is our corporate health services. So that's helping staff and employees to be the best that they can and the best version of themselves. Not surprisingly, this is quite a big area of our business at the moment, given the current circumstances. Your Health Plus, which delivers our technology solutions, so our digital mental health services. Care Squared, which is a disability brand, helping children and adults to build their capacity. Generation Care, which is our aged care brand. Assessment Squared, which does assessments for justice and medico-legal settings. And again, Back to Work, which is our Australian return to work services business. So it's quite a broad range, but I just thought I'd give you that introduction. But before we get started today, I wanted to give you my thinking around this topic. Many of you have asked me about the Thrive model and contacted me after we delivered the Thrive presentation, which if you weren't there, I will quickly revise at the end of tonight. But how can I use the Thrive model to help my clients right now? So tonight's session is really about taking the skills that you've learned to apply to yourself, and then to use those skills with your clients and how you might implement those over the phone or digitally via video call. So if you've got any questions, please add in those to either the chat or the Q&A. And at the end of tonight, Helen will kindly follow those for me, or otherwise they become quite distracting. And if you haven't used webinar before, that is the best way to talk, because there are too many people on the line for me to take you off mute. So let's get into it. I gave you a little bit of an overview of the company and myself, and we have Natalie Keating, our CEO, on the line, and Andy Milne on the line as well. But my objective tonight is to help you to develop an understanding of how to apply the Thrive model with your clients. This data came out recently, and I thought it was really interesting to present as part of how we all might be feeling, but also how our clients might be feeling. So you can see here on the scale, I'll start using my annotator. You can see here that happiness rating since between the 5th of March and the 30th of March, which wasn't that long ago, it was kind of 20 odd days ago, they significantly dropped. Our stress ratings significantly increased, although some of us got used to isolation, I think, and they dropped a little bit. Frustration has no doubt increased. And then our whether or not we're frightened has really significantly increased. Sadness across the world, and this is actually UK data, but this rating across the world has significantly increased as well. Boredom, there are only so many Netflix shows you can watch. I'm not sure if you realise that it's getting pretty desperate in our house to find a series that we haven't seen. It's getting a little bit boring for some people. And interestingly, there's been a sense of contentment that people's feelings of contentment have dropped over time. I showed you this slide because I thought this is really recent data that showed us how our clients are likely to be feeling. And often when we try to empathize with our clients, we need to be able to put ourselves in their shoes. And it's not surprising that we're all probably experiencing these feelings, and that's quite normal. But those feelings on top of not working, we could probably suggest that they would be significantly lower. So I'm going to propose a 5-step model for introducing Thrive to your job seekers. The first step is a check-in step. The second step is to teach the model or teach the skill. The third step is to ask. The fourth step is to empathize. And the fifth step is to find a way forward with the client. Step 1 is really important, and this, if you haven't seen it before, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it talks through what our most basic primary needs are, moving all the way up to feeling self-actualized and being the best that we can be. And I'll talk you through a story of a client that I was working with a couple of years ago now. And it was the second session that I was seeing this person. They were returning to work, but they had depression as well. And as we sat down for the second session, I really launched into, okay, right, how did we go with our homework? How have you been? What's been happening? Did you get things done that I asked you to get done? And my voice was probably faster and faster than that. But as I looked at this client, all I could notice was that she was kind of agitated in her seat and moving around and wasn't really paying much attention to me. So I continued on with my conversation and then looked at her again and realized that she wasn't paying much attention. And what I hadn't realized is that when I stopped for a second, she hadn't eaten in 2 days, and she was so hungry that she couldn't concentrate on a word that I was saying. And what I realized at that point was that Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that we actually need to make sure that first and foremost, people have got water, food, shelter, sleep and clothes before we even start talking to them about this whole idea of returning to work. Really good reminder for you. When you're checking in with your clients, the first step is to really make sure that we've understood that their first physiological and primary needs are being met, or otherwise they're not going to hear us when we start talking about the Thrive model or any other mental health model or any other support model moving forward. So step 1 is check in. Let's check in and see where the client's at. Step 2 is to really start teaching the model, is to look for an opportunity to and an entry point. And the words I like to use there is, could could we take a moment to talk about a skill that I know about that might help you with this situation? It's good to use some visual aids if you can. If you're using a video conferencing tool that uses visual aids, to use those at the same time. And I'm including some visual aids in tonight's presentation for you to take away. The third step is to ask. So ask about last week or ask about yesterday. So if we were to teach the Thrive model in step 2 and we talk about time and routine, and we talk about the helpful thinking, we talk about reasonableness, we talk about increasing connectedness, we talk about our values, and we talk about making sure that the job seeker is making some time to have enjoyable experiences. The best way to get a client to change, if you consider motivational interviewing strategies, is to ask them how they went against that model yesterday. So this is a handout that will be included in our webinar today that you can take away and use with your clients. So we've included down the left-hand side here the daily schedule for the person, the to-do list for the person, their work goals, what they would like to eat today, their exercise plan, their social contacts, and their positive self-talk. Now, if we were introducing this to a client, we would ask them to fill it out for yesterday first. So I would use the words, if we were thinking about Thrive, let's consider how you went yesterday. Let's fill in the daily schedule. What did you do in the morning? What did you do at lunchtime? And what did you do in the afternoon? And what did you do in the evening? Did you have any positive self-talk? Were you thinking positively? Let's go through that and write that down. Did you take any steps towards work yesterday? And what is your overall work goal? Let's reiterate that. And what about yesterday? What did you eat? And what did you do in relation to exercise and social contact? So really it's about an assessment of yesterday. If we apply the Thrive model and run that lens over yesterday, where did you fit? And what we're really aiming to do here is to get a practical assessment of how they're going against the Thrive model. Again, the way that we ask these questions is really important, and the word could is the most open way to start any of your questions with a job seeker. So could we go through this planner, or could we make some time to talk about this, are all the most open ways to start the open-ended questions with a job seeker. So step 1, to reiterate, is to make sure the job seeker is at the right stage to discuss the Thrive model. Step 2 is to teach the Thrive model, which if you were at our earlier webinar would know all the stages of, but I'll summarise shortly. Step 3 is to really assess and ask how they're going against that learning. Step 4 is to empathise. There's a lot of misunderstanding in employability about the word empathy. Empathy is actually stepping in the other person's shoes and acknowledging their emotional reaction that they might be having in those shoes at that time. So it doesn't mean that you need to have been unemployed to empathise with an unemployed person. It just means that you need to be really skilled at stepping into their shoes and understanding the emotions that they might be having at that time. So it's a common emotion that we all have, which is fear, a common emotion that we all have, which is sadness and frustration. That's the commonality in empathizing with somebody. Sympathizing with someone is actually feeling sad for them. And sympathy is also somewhat creates a power differential with you and the client, and that is the last thing that you want to do with a job seeker, is to feel that you are more powerful than the job seeker. So we need to create an alliance, and the best way to do that is through presenting really good empathy. Interestingly, research has shown that we can attribute 30% of the client change or the client outcomes to things that you do. So absolutely nothing to do with what you say, but how aligned you are with the client, how good you are at empathy, and how warm you are to that person will have a 30% impact on their change. And when I talk about change, I talk about the changes in their behaviours that they need to make to get motivated to either get a job or stay in a job. So that 30% is a pretty powerful number, and it's really powerful when you think about the current circumstances, because if you're only able to provide your clients at the moment with great empathy, warmth, and a really strong alliance, you're going to help them 30% of the way when the time comes to getting a job. Even if there's not one there right now, the skills and the way that you engage with a client right now makes a big difference. The other really interesting part about the research and data on empathy is that it's not how empathetic you thought you were, it's what the job seeker thinks about you. So if the job seeker feels that you create warmth for them and you create that they feel aligned to you and you're empathetic towards their causes and you understand what it's like to be in their shoes at the moment, then that is the most powerful predictor of whether or not a job seeker will change and return to the workforce. At your advice, I might add. So really interesting information about empathy if you think about it, and if you think about the fact that we need to now provide empathy over the telephone or empathy via video call, there's a number of active listening skills which are even more important now. So we know the active listening skills, we know the nod, the head nods, we know the all of those things. It's really difficult to do that on a video call and telephone call. So it's important to rely on these other three active listening skills, which is repeating what the job seeker is saying back to them, such as, okay, so I hear you're saying, X, Y, Z. Paraphrasing, which is repeating the story back to the job seeker, but in your own words. And also checking that you're hearing them right. So am I hearing you right when I say that? And reflecting feelings, and this comes back to empathy, and not surprisingly, if we go back, let me see if I can go back. Here's the feelings. We know what the feelings are that job seekers are experiencing at the moment. They're feeling stressed, frustrated, scared, sad, bored. They're the kinds of feelings that they would be having. So if we were to reflect some feelings at the moment, we would probably be using those types of feelings. So it sounds like you are quite frustrated at the moment. And that's a way of reflecting the feelings of the job seeker, and also letting the job seeker know that you know what it's like to be in their shoes at the moment. So in the model, we've gone to asking, stage one. Sorry, we've gone to checking in at stage one. We've gone to asking at stage two. Stage two, we've gone to the Thrive model, teaching. Stage three, we've gone to asking about how they went against the model that we're teaching them. And stage four, we're now moving to empathizing with their current situation. The last stage is really working out a way to move forward. So working with the client to develop their Thrive model for tomorrow. Most people won't engage in a activity planner or a scheduling type of program unless it's delivered for the day after. People who set calendars for a week or 2 weeks find it boring, and most clients don't stick to it. So we encourage people to set the model up for tomorrow and then set a timer in your phone or your diary to do a planner for the next day. So if we were planning for Thursday, we'd do it today. On Thursday night, we'll plan for Friday, and then on Friday night, we'll plan for Saturday, and so on. So again, I guess it's about now looking at what tools you can use to help the client plan. I'll just step back to our planner, which we're going to use and hand out to you. If we were to use this planner, working out a way forward with the job seeker, we would plan out their schedule, plan out their to-do list, reiterate their work goal, work on their exercise and eating, and then also build in some social contacts for them at that time. But let's quickly run through the Thrive model for those of you who weren't here in our earlier presentations. So Thrive essentially stands for 6 different actions that you could do right now to build your resilience and mental health. Time and routine. So we need our time and our routine to match as many of these healthy mind platter activities as possible. Helpful thinking. At the moment, we know what people are worrying about. The data is showing us that 49% of us are worried about losing our job, losing our home, paying bills, not seeing family, and so on. So if we put that into the helpful thinking model, we might see these kind of thoughts that job seekers would be having. You know, I'll never find a job, I won't be able to support my family. And if you recall, the helpful thinking model looked at the situation that the person's in, the negative thoughts that they might be having, and the consequent feelings and the rating for that feeling. It might be, if I say to myself enough, I'll never find a job now, that we have this situation in the UK, that might cause you to feel depressed and anxious. But a disputing thought, or another way of thinking about this, might be, if I keep using all the methods to find work, it will happen when it needs to happen, which still might make me feel depressed and sad, but the intensity of that depression will reduce when I reframe or dispute the negative thought that I've had earlier on. So we need to teach clients how to use that and that model. And the reason why I've color coded the A, B, and C is that's normally the first stage of teaching. We would teach people how to identify their thoughts and what the differences are between their thoughts and their feelings. Again, if we go back to earlier slides, we can kind of guess the feelings that people are having at the moment, but everybody's feeling is a little bit different and the intensity of that feeling is a little bit different. So we've used the words depressed, anxious, and stressed, but there may be other feelings that clients are having. So it's really important to help the client to identify the A, B, and C first, and then help them to create a disputing thought. Again, the R is what's reasonable, and that's focusing in on what you can control at the moment rather than the things that you can't control. And really setting aside some time to do worrying if you want to do worrying, but containing that worry to, 20 minutes a day rather than it lasting 20 hours a day. Increasing connectedness was the I, which is making sure that we're connecting with our peers, connecting with our friends, connecting with our family. And the V was working out how you can live your life to your values. And in this setting, I'm encouraging you to talk to job seekers about what you value, and your clients about what they value about work or what they value about their lives at the moment. And using this to create a bit of a plan around how they might become the best version of themselves during this time. It may be that they need to consider, if they're returning to work, stepping stone jobs and how they might use their transferable skills to move into other markets such as healthcare, where we know we still have people being employed. The enjoyment is the E in Thrive, which is making sure we've got time for activities that are fun and making time for fun, eating and physically also being active. So here's the model and the handout, which we will send out to you. But you can see how this handout really drives the Thrive model. It gives the T, which is the time and routine. It gives the helpful thinking. So if you find it hard to teach your clients helpful thinking, we can just ask them to put some helpful thoughts down on paper for each day. The R, which is focusing on what you can control and creating a to-do list around the things that you can do. The I, which is increasing connectedness. Who are you going to connect with today? Let's write down 2 people. The V is what do I value at work at the moment, and how am I going to move myself forward to that, and how am I going to keep myself relevant for the workforce? And the E is making sure we've got some time for enjoyment into our daily planner. So essentially, this handout will become like your assessment as well as the way forward. So point 3 or step 3, which is ask, we're going to use this handout as an assessment tool for yesterday. And point 5, we're going to use this handout again, but this time a cleaner version of this handout to create a plan for helping the client to move forward. So that's how I'd apply the Thrive model that we're all applying to our lives, I'm sure. But this time we're giving you a handout for it. If you're really interested in the Thrive model and how you might apply this across a broader context, we've put together a 6-week job seeker program, which is called Thriving into Work, which will, as you can see from this slide, address the THRIVE throughout each of the weeks to ensure that job seekers have the best opportunity and the highest level of resilience to get through this current situation and either gain or sustain work. And if you're interested in these sessions or in us running these sessions for job seekers, you can contact Natalie or Andy. And lastly, there are some advisor sessions as well that we'll be delivering, which will be starting in the next 2 weeks. And they will be a little bit different to these webinars. They'll be longer, but also we'll be providing some extra skills and resources and tools for advisors. So that's about all from me. I did a lot of talking, so I might hand it over to Helen for some questions, and I'll take it back to this summary slide.
Okay, thank you for that, Kylie. We do have some questions that have been submitted. So the first one we have for you, is there a suggested response to a participant when they have reported the death of a close friend or family member? What sort of approach can we take for that?
Yes, I guess the first approach for that is empathy. There is nothing that you can say or do that is going to make that situation better, but to sit and listen and to hear the client out. And I must say that even in psychological therapy, grief is really firstly about listening, and treating someone for grief is listening. So there is no magic bullet in that one, I'm sorry. It's just about listening and hearing.
And having that space, yeah. Okay, yeah. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Another question we've had is it wise to allow the participant to go as deep as they wish to into the circumstances? So that it could be in that instance, or it could be really with any of the topics we've talked. So the circumstances of them feeling anxious over COVID, perhaps.
I think there is a limit to and a boundary to the role that you play as an advisor. I kind of call it the 15-minute limit. If somebody was to approach me in the kitchen and ask me to give them advice around a particular issue that they have, I limit it to 15 minutes. So I think hearing the client and the feelings and where they're at for around 15 minutes is in your remit, but where it starts taking over the whole session that's where we might need to think about ways to either engage a health professional to assist you with your job seekers, or to look at some kind of referral pathway to support that person. I think it'd be unwise not to hear the anxiety about the current situation and try to ignore it. That would be particularly unwise, but put a boundary around it, and sometimes 15 minutes is a good way of thinking about it.
Excellent, brilliant, thank you. And another question, and this links into the current times, is are there any other resources that we can call on in these unprecedented times? I think you've mentioned some of those with some of the additional courses you have coming up.
Yes, I think that's right. I think in relation to employability and mental health, probably we're one of the largest providers delivering those services. If we're just talking about mental health at the moment, there are obviously a range of government initiatives that you can get involved in.
Excellent, fantastic, thank you. And then we've also had some questions around, and I think you've mentioned it, we're going to have handouts this week. So I've been asked as well around the assessment sheet. So will we be sending those out at the end of the webinar to everyone that's attended today?
Yes, definitely, because I want you to use those as an assessment as well as a way forward with the clients.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. Well, those are all the questions that I've received at the moment.
Excellent. I might just check in on my colleagues if they had anything to add. Natalie or Andy?
I think I would just say that I think the presentation that you've gone through today, it will be really supportive if the tools are used, which is obviously why we are going to share those. And also, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Andy if we can support in any way. Obviously, we've now launched the Thrive programme that's appropriate for job seekers and also to support advisors and any other colleague who's working within the sector. So the advice, it doesn't have to be an advisor. It could be a colleague who's working with a cohort, maybe a trainer. We can adapt those sessions to meet those needs. But please don't hesitate to email or call us if you want to know more about the programme or you want to make a referral.
Darlie has asked a question about what sorts of questions could we ask to help clients to form disputing thoughts. I think the easiest question to ask, and job seekers get this every time I say it, is sometimes, you know, the glass is half empty, the glass is half full. What kind of thinking do you normally notice yourself having? Or I might say a question like, if you thought about all the thoughts that were running through your head yesterday, what percentage were positive and what percentage were negative? And then once we bring it back to the glass is half full, how could we think about this in a different way? Or is there another way we could think about this? So that's a good question.
Excellent. I think that covers everything we've had in then.
Excellent. So we'll leave the chat going if you want to chat to any of your colleagues on the chat for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And if you've got any further questions,
we've just had one more in, just as you were saying that. Someone's popped in there that they work with ex-offenders and the organisation gives them support to get back into work or study. During these current uncertain times with COVID-19, what would be the most effective approach towards our clients? So I guess that would be, would it differ from the approach we would be taking with other sort of participants on programs?
I think absolutely not. I think we would use the exact same model. In fact, it's even more important for an ex-offender to have a routine and a schedule, depending on how long they've been incarcerated for. They become really used to that routine, and it becomes something that relieves their anxiety when there is a sense of structure in their lives. So the Thrive model is a really perfect application to that cohort group.
Excellent. And sort of there's a comment there around ex-offenders becoming demotivated, but that's something we're seeing in most people at the moment with the lockdown, isn't it? So really focusing on what we can do to harness motivation for people.
I think you're right. And also don't forget that digital technologies are really prominent at the moment. So getting them to set reminders on their phone, or using the phone if they're not interested in using the Thrive daily planner that we're going to hand out. We can do some of these activities still by setting alarms on their phones and using that more as a reminder system.
And using the digital technology in a more positive way, rather than focusing on because it can be quite negative, can't it, at the moment, looking at things and increasing anxiety, using it as a force for positive motivation instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
Okay, everybody, we'll let you keep chatting, and thank you again today. Next week's session is on digital health and mental health. So we will be talking more about innovations around mental health and digital services. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kylie.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thanks, Kylie and the team. Really fantastic webinar again. We're really grateful to them doing that from the other side of the world. As I said, this is the 4th in the series. If you want to catch up on the 3 that you may have missed, you'll be able to go to the IEP YouTube channel. I've already put the contact details there in the chat. Please get involved, in touch with us at the IEP. If there's anything you want to see or want to do, please give us your feedback. We're always really, really keen to get that. And also, as you can see on the screen, please get in touch with Natalie or Andy if you want to really, really delve into the Thrive program and do some considerable work. As they've said, the handout will be around the assessment tool. We'll get that out to you. The recording will be up on the IEP YouTube channel pretty much as we finish here today, or at least this afternoon. So yeah, thank you very much. Join us next week, and we'll see you then. Take care.
Thanks.